Congress has introduced a new bill that would remove suppressors from the NFA and eliminate all the federal restrictions and regulations, including the tax and registration. Now, before we jump into this video, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Attorneys on Retainer. When it comes to self-defense protection, don't settle for an insurance company or their limitations. You can have the best self-defense protection, which is through a law firm and actual attorneys. If you have to act in self-defense, AOR has your back, and that's whether it's a good shoot, it's a gray area, or a more complicated situation. AOR will protect you, and they have a dedicated access to attorneys 24/7, 365. So if you're interested in the best self-defense protection out there, check out AOR using the links down below in my details section and pinned comment. And if you sign up using the code ARMSCHOLAR, you can get $50 off of your individual sign-up plan and then $25 if you pick the family plan. Like I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be talking about a really important bill which was introduced into Congress. And this bill aims to remove suppressors from the NFA and essentially remove their federal restrictions, remove the taxation requirement, the registration requirement, all of those federal restrictions on these items. This renewed effort hopes to leverage the conservative majority in Congress in both the House and the Senate, along with Trump now being the president, to finally deregulate suppressors and get this effort passed through Congress and eventually signed into law. Now, the bill we're going to be talking about in this video is HR 404, and it's also known as the Hearing Protection Act. Now, this bill here was reintroduced by Congressman Klein out of Virginia. And many of you are familiar with the Hearing Protection Act because it was introduced before, but unfortunately with the Democrats in control of Congress and of course with President Biden as the president, there was no way that a bill like this would ever pass. However, now the hope is finally that since we have Congress and the president, we can get a big push for this type of bill to get passed, and it's actually supported already by 39 co-signers within the House. Now, what does the Hearing Protection Act state and what does it do? Well, in essence, it's pretty straightforward. It changes some of the federal language in the laws and the statute to where the tax and registration and possession and all of those transportation restrictions under federal laws when it comes to suppressors will in fact no longer be enforced. Essentially, all restrictions would be removed when it comes to these items, and in essence, they would be treated just as any kind of other firearm. So the process you would go to get a firearm would be almost identical now to what you would also go through to get a suppressor. So that's a huge leap in the right direction to remove all of the weird restrictions that we currently have on suppressors. Now, the bill states that the section of law here is going to be amended to add and include the following. Notwithstanding the preceding sentence, a law of a state or political subdivision of a state that imposes a tax other than generally applicable sales or use tax on making, transferring, using, possessing, or transporting a firearm silencer in or affecting interstate or foreign commerce, or imposing a marking, record-keeping, or registration requirement with respect to such a firearm silencer shall have no force or effect. So that's kind of the general language there that's going to remove various federal restrictions, but also very important there in that language is the fact that it's also going to remove those federal restrictions, but also any state limitations there. So states like California, who have restrictions on suppressors, who have a statewide ban on just average citizens being able to have suppressors, it would also impact those state laws. Because also keep in mind that states like California that ban suppressors and other types of NFA items, typically they are targeting the NFA items themselves, and they're trying to restrict the access to those NFA items. But if the NFA itself is changed at its foundation to where it no longer covers suppressors, well, then the foundation of these state laws is pretty much shattered because, again, they are targeting NFA items. But if suppressors are removed from the NFA and you no longer have the taxation, registration, and it just generally doesn't apply to those items, well, then those state bans would also go out the door. The bill also goes on to state that the Attorney General will have 1 year from the enactment of the bill to destroy all registration records of suppressors. The bill states that no later than 365 days after the date of enactment of this act, the Attorney General shall destroy any registration of these silencers maintained in the National Firearms Registration and Transferred Record any application to transfer that identifies the transferee of the silencer, and any application that identifies the maker of a silencer. So that is the general language there that would remove the current and potential future registration of these suppressors and these items. And it would mandate that all of the past records be destroyed within 1 year. The bill also goes on to clarify what is it going to target. And it says, for the purposes of this part and for this bill, the terms firearm silencer or firearm muffler mean any device for silencing, muffling, or diminishing the report of a portable firearm. So that means almost anything that you think of as a traditional suppressor would fall under this bill. The bill also states that it will strike out various paragraphs of the federal laws and also modify some of the serialization and marking requirements. So what's the general takeaway of this bill? Like I mentioned, in essence, it's pretty straightforward. This piece of legislation would eliminate all the current suppressor purchase and possession restrictions and requirements. It would remove the taxation requirement, the registration requirement, and also would mandate the elimination of all the records that are already in place, tracking what suppressors are owned by who. This would allow for suppressors to be purchased and possessed with simply the same paperwork that you would have to go through to purchase any other firearm. Also with the serialization, pretty similar to what would be in place for firearms as well. So that would mean that you would be able to buy a suppressor almost in the same way that you would purchase any other firearm. So again, a huge leap in the right direction. It would eliminate the mandatory tax, the registration, and all those requirements that we, hate, and all that process you have to go through to get a suppressor. Instead, it would be pretty similar to a firearm. It would also clarify that the definition of a suppressor is straightforward, ensuring that components like mounts, baffles, and end caps don't suddenly get classified as standalone suppressors or silencers. And that's important because what we've seen happen and develop over the last few years is the ATF has tried to expand the definition of what a suppressor is to regulate more items. They've now said that parts or baffles or tubes and all these things, although they're not operable in their own right, even though they're not configured into a full accessory, those parts on their own as a standalone could be considered a silencer or suppressor. And so this bill here would say, no, that is not the case. Now, Congressman Klein stated in his press release on this Hearing Protection Act that Americans who enjoy hunting and target shooting should be able to do so safely and legally without facing burdensome government regulations. The Hearing Protection Act will reclassify suppressors, making it easier for law-abiding gun owners to protect their hearing while enjoying recreational activities. It's time to ensure that our Second Amendment rights are upheld, allowing responsible citizens to enjoy their freedoms without unnecessary obstacles. Now, this bill is also heavily supported by a ton of other organizations. In fact, ASA as well is supporting them, and that is the American Suppressor Association. So they are supporting this as well. They released a statement and they said that the Hearing Protection Act is the epitome of common sense legislation. Law-abiding citizens should not have to pay a tax to protect their hearing when they exercise their Second Amendment rights. NSSF also released a statement in support of this bill, and they stated that Congressman Klein's Hearing Protection Act will have the federal government recognize firearm suppressors for what they are. These are accessories to a firearm that make recreational shooting and hunting a safer experience. These safety devices reduce the report of a firearm to a level that won't cause instant and permanent hearing damage. Despite Hollywood's depictions, they do not mask the sound of a firearm. So this is really a cool bill. I think it's an important bill. And of course, I would love to see this actually get passed through Congress and for Trump to sign it into law. That would be huge. But of course, there's always the filibuster that's in the way that could stop something like this. But hopefully with control of Congress right now and Trump also in place, there can be a big push and maybe some pressure put on this effort to finally get a bill like this passed and to remove the restrictions on suppressors so that more people have access to them. And states like California can no longer just outright ban them because they just target NFA items. And again, this would go a long way to remove those type of restrictions as well. So again, this is an important bill. We're going to be keeping our eyes on it. It's a bill that was introduced in the past, but of course we didn't have Congress and Trump as a president. So now we're going to be hoping that we get good movement on this. Contact your representatives, let them know you're in support of the Hearing Protection Act so we can get more momentum behind this bill. And as more things develop, I will let you guys know. If you like this information and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. But as always, thank you guys for watching, Don't forget to like and subscribe, and never forget this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.